So, picture this. You are sitting in a meeting, and let's say there's this guy. We'll call him Bob.
Oh, we all know Bob.
Right. Everyone has a Bob in their life. He's the guy who has been just, subtly undermining you for like 6 months.
It's just those little passive-aggressive kind of...
Exactly. Well, Bob just hit reply all to the entire company.
Oh, no.
And he attached the completely wrong financial projections. I mean, it is a massive, glaring, undeniably public mistake.
The kind you just absolutely cannot walk back.
Totally. And in that exact fraction of a second, your heart just leaps.
Oh, you can feel the adrenaline.
You really can. Your fingers are just like hovering over the keyboard. There is this sudden, almost intoxicating surge of glee, and you want nothing more than to just absolutely destroy him.
It is such an intense feeling.
It really is.
So for everyone listening to this deep dive today, we are going to dissect that exact millisecond.
Yes, that tiny window of time. Because today we are looking at the psychology of interpersonal conflict, specifically focusing on this very intense, very universal urge. It's what happens when you have a rival, someone you are fundamentally at odds with, and they basically just hand you a loaded gun by messing up.
It's the kind of territory most of us experience regularly, but we rarely want to admit to it.
Right, because it feels a little petty, right?
Exactly. Even to ourselves, it feels petty. But if we just strip away the moral judgment for a moment, what we are actually looking at is behavioral machinery. We are looking at raw human instinct.
So it's not a character flaw.
No, not at all. This deep dive isn't about labeling you or anyone else as good or bad for feeling that urge to pounce.
That is a huge relief.
Right. The goal here is just to understand the precise mechanics of your own mind when that happens. Because once you understand it, you can stop being a passenger to your instincts.
And you can actually start creating a much more powerful, intentional daily life. Okay, let's unpack this. Because in that moment, the urge to capitalize on their error, to point out the flaw and subtly, or maybe not so subtly, just crush them, it feels entirely overwhelming.
It feels incredibly necessary in that moment.
Right. So let's dissect the absolute root of this issue and look at the very first millisecond of that urge to attack.
Okay, let's do it.
Because behavioral psychology points out something crucial here. When a rival makes an error, that sudden urge we feel to take advantage of it is not a logical, reasoned thought.
No, not at all.
It hasn't even passed through the prefrontal cortex yet. It's an animalistic, instinctive reaction.
It is entirely primal. It is a classic case of what we call amygdala hijacking.
Amygdala hijacking.
Yeah. So when you see someone you perceive as a threat or a rival falter in some way, your brain doesn't pull up a spreadsheet of ethical consideration.
Like, oh, what is the right thing to do here?
Right. It doesn't care about long-term consequences in that split second. It triggers a survival mechanism.
Because historically, a rival's weakness meant something very specific, right?
Exactly. In our evolutionary past, a rival's weakness meant an immediate opportunity to secure your own position. It was about your resources, your status within the tribe.
Your literal survival.
Literally.
Yeah.
And while we aren't exactly fighting for scraps of food on the savannah anymore, our brains still operate on that exact same hardware.
Wow.
Yeah, so in modern social and professional settings, self-preservation just looks a little different. It looks like protecting your ego, your reputation, and your perceived hierarchy in the office.
So when Bob accidentally replies all with that typo-ridden, factually incorrect email, your brain essentially registers a massive drop in his defensive posture.
Yes.
It's like playing a video game where your opponent suddenly drops their shield and your thumbs just automatically hit the attack button before your conscious brain even registers what happened.
That is a perfect analogy.
It's just hardwired into the system to say, the rival is wounded, secure dominance.
Precisely. That feeling of wanting to be superior in that moment is fundamentally a psychological defense mechanism.
A defense mechanism.
Yeah. You feel a surge of superiority because it momentarily neutralizes the perceived threat that Bob poses to your own status.
Oh, I see. Because if Bob is exposed as incompetent, then Bob is no longer a danger to your position in the hierarchy.
Exactly. And your brain actually rewards you with a huge hit of dopamine just for noticing his vulnerability.
Really?
Oh, yeah. It's chemically incentivizing you to strike.
Okay, but let me ask you this. On behalf of everyone listening who is thinking this right now, shouldn't the goal be to train ourselves to be so, I don't know, enlightened that we just don't feel this petty, vindictive urge at all?
That is such a common question.
Right. Like if you want to be a mature adult, shouldn't you aspire to a state where Bob's mistake just elicits pure compassion instantly rather than having to wrestle with this dark impulse to destroy him?
I mean, it sounds nice in theory, but attempting to completely erase a primal instinct is just an exercise in futility.
Because it's biological.
Right. It's like trying to command your heart to stop beating or telling your stomach to stop digesting your lunch.
You literally can't do it.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here is that if you tell yourself, I shouldn't feel this way, I'm a terrible person for wanting to gloat, you are actually just layering shame on top of an automatic biological response.
Oh, wow. Which just makes it worse.
It creates massive internal conflict. Emotional regulation is absolutely not about feeling nothing.
Okay.
It is not about reaching some unattainable state of robotic neutrality or, instant sainthood.
Right, which means the victory isn't in eradicating the biological reality of the feeling.
No, it's not.
The psychological literature actually suggests it's about metacognition, right? Cultivating the power to notice the feeling without becoming it.
Yes, that is the exact pivot point.
So when Bob sends that email, you feel the rush of glee. You feel the thumb moving to hit the attack button. But in that millisecond, you develop the capacity to observe the urge happening from a third-party perspective.
Yes, you step into the role of the observer.
Yeah.
You say to yourself, there's the animal brain wanting to pounce. I see the mechanism activating.
Just kind of watching it happen.
Exactly. And once you notice the instinct, you effectively separate your consciousness from it. You are no longer the urge. You are the observer of the urge.
And right there, in that tiny gap between the stimulus and the response, your prefrontal cortex finally comes back online.
It reboots.
You reclaim your free will. You acknowledge the biological reality of the feeling without letting it dictate your behavior.
That is the crucial step.
Okay, so step one is noticing. But, I mean, we are human, and sometimes that metacognitive gap closes way too quickly.
Oh, it happens to all of us.
Right, we get
Okay.
swept up, the dopamine takes the wheel, and we actually give in to the urge to attack. We hit reply all right back to Bob, and we meticulously point out his mistake for everyone in the company to see.
We've all been there.
We really have. So if noticing the urge is step one, failing that step and giving in leads us directly into a massive behavioral trap. Let's examine the consequences of actually retaliating.
Well, when you give in to the urge and point out the rival's mistake, you do get a profound sense of satisfaction.
You really do. It feels amazing for a second.
Right, we can't deny the neurochemistry of it. You get that dopamine spike, you pointed out the flaw, you asserted your dominance, you ostensibly won the interaction.
Yeah.
But that victory is an absolute mirage.
A mirage.
Yes. Because if we look at the actual mechanics of human relationships, publicly shaming someone or over-criticizing them rarely, if ever, resolves the underlying tension.
Right.
It almost universally exacerbates it.
Because instead of the person experiencing some grand epiphany where they say, gosh, you are so right, I am foolish and you are brilliant, they actually just become incredibly stubborn.
Exactly. They dig their heels in.
The relationship just becomes deeply, perhaps permanently entangled in this new, more vicious cycle of conflict.
It spirals.
It's like pointing out their mistake in order to feel superior is like drinking salt water when you're desperately thirsty.
This is exactly what it's like.
It feels incredibly satisfying and necessary for that first gulp, but ultimately it actively accelerates your dehydration. It leaves you much worse off than when you started.
That is the exact mechanism at play. You are basically purchasing a short-term dopamine hit at the cost of your long-term emotional bandwidth.
That is such a powerful way to frame it.
Because to understand why it backfires so spectacularly, we really have to look at the recipient's internal experience. We have to look at the psychology of ego threat.
Okay, let's look at that.
When you corner a human being and humiliate them, you trigger their own survival instincts. They experience a severe threat to their social standing.
So they go into fight or flight, too.
Exactly. And just like your prefrontal cortex shut down when you felt the urge to attack, their logical brain shuts down when they are attacked.
Wow, so they aren't even hearing your very logical, well-reasoned argument.
Absolutely not. They are absolutely not processing your brilliant critique of their spreadsheet. All their brain is processing is, I am under attack. I must defend myself at all costs.
So for you listening right now, think about the last time you utterly dismantled someone's argument, especially someone you already don't get along with.
Oh, this is a great exercise.
Right. You had the facts, you had the logic, you delivered the perfect verbal strike. Did they look at you with profound gratitude and thank you for showing them the light?
Rarely happens.
Or did they just resent you more? Did it actually solve the tension between you two, or did it just drive it underground where it could mutate into a long-term vendetta?
The recipient, out of sheer pride and self-preservation, will double down on their mistakes almost every time.
Just to save face?
Yes. They will construct elaborate rationalizations to justify their error. And more importantly, they will begin actively looking for any opportunity to retaliate against you in the future.
So the cycle of friction just spins faster.
Exactly. True emotional maturity requires recognizing this highly predictable pattern.
It's prioritizing the long-term health of the relationship. Or, honestly, at the very least, prioritizing your own long-term peace of mind over a momentary, cheap victory.
Yes, it is a fundamental misunderstanding of strategy if you attack.
It's like playing chess where an amateur takes the opponent's pawn simply because it's right there and it feels good to capture a piece.
Exactly.
But the grandmaster leaves the pawn alone because taking it ruins their defensive position for the rest of the game. Retaliation is an amateur move in the game of long-term emotional well-being.
A very costly amateur move.
If retaliating just hands the attacker a megaphone and destroys our own peace of mind, we're left with this massive behavioral puzzle. How do we neutralize the threat without engaging it?
Right.
And that brings us to the alternative, which is the deliberate, active choice of non-retaliation, the power of the pause.
And choosing not to counterattack is frequently misunderstood in our culture.
It really is.
People often view silence or non-reaction as a sign of weakness or capitulation.
Yeah, they think if I don't say something, if I don't defend myself, they win.
Exactly. But behavioral psychology argues the exact opposite. Choosing not to attack is a profound, almost overwhelming display of mental strength.
How so?
Because it prevents you from sinking your emotional state to the attacker's volatility.
Oh.
Taking a single breath to pause allows you to choose your response rather than being enslaved by your own limbic system.
We discussed earlier the difference between erasing an emotion and noticing it. And here we really see the distinction between suppressing emotion and observing emotion.
Yes, there is a massive difference.
Because suppressing is just stuffing it down. It's biting your tongue so hard it bleeds, right? White-knuckling your way through the interaction while your blood pressure skyrockets and cortisol just floods your system.
Which is biologically destructive.
Totally. But observing is acknowledging, I feel intensely angry right now. I feel the heat in my chest. My heart rate is way up.
You feel all of the physiological markers of anger.
Right. But then you use your executive function to make a choice. You choose a calm, non-reactive physical posture anyway.
And that contrast in physical posture is where the power dynamic completely shifts.
Paint that picture for us.
Imagine the scene. The rival realizes their mistake, or perhaps they are actively attacking you to cover it up. They are emotionally volatile. Their voice is raised, their energy is chaotic, their breathing is shallow.
They are all over the place.
Exactly. And then there is you, profoundly calm, unreactive, breathing deeply, just observing.
Wow.
That visible contrast communicates a massive, undeniable power differential without a single word being spoken.
It's like an electrical circuit. They are a live wire thrashing around, throwing off sparks, desperately looking for a ground.
Right.
If you react, if you argue back, you complete the circuit and take the shock. You allow their frantic energy to travel through you.
But if you stay calm,
you remain an insulator. The energy has nowhere to go but back into them.
that is a brilliant way to visualize it.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. I want to push back on this because there is a very natural fear that arises here for a lot of people.
Okay, let's hear it.
If a rival is actively attacking you or making a massive mistake that directly impacts your work and you just sit there and take it, taking deep breaths like a monk, aren't you just being a doormat?
That is the #1 concern.
Like, how do you, as the listener, ensure you don't just get walked all over in a highly competitive environment?
It is the most common hesitation when discussing non-retaliation. We naturally equate non-reaction with passive surrender.
Exactly.
But non-retaliation is absolutely not playing dead.
Yeah.
It is a highly complex, incredibly active psychological maneuver.
Active? How is doing nothing active?
By not reacting to their provocation, you are fundamentally refusing to validate their aggression. An attack is essentially an invitation to a specific kind of behavioral dance.
Oh, I see.
They are signaling, I am angry, I want to fight, engage with me on this low frequency.
And when you remain calm,
You are signaling back, I see your invitation and I categorically decline.
you are maintaining your boundaries not by building a wall they can punch, but by refusing to play their game entirely.
Exactly.
A doormat lets someone wipe their feet on them. You are simply removing the floor altogether.
I love that.
You are denying them the friction they desperately need for their fire. If you fight back, you give them something to push against. If you don't fight back, they're literally just swinging at empty air.
It is a boundary of strict composure. You are demonstrating in real time that your internal state is not dependent on their external behavior.
And it is so powerful.
It is the highest form of self-respect. And ironically, it commands the most respect from others, even if they don't consciously realize it in the moment.
Because you aren't easily manipulated.
Right. When you refuse to provide that friction, you trigger a profound cognitive dissonance within the attacker.
Which means while you're sitting there remaining calm, something highly chaotic is happening across the table.
Very chaotic.
Let's look inside the mind of the attacker for a minute. What happens to their psychology when they hit this wall of calm? Because anger and provocation require resistance to sustain themselves, right?
Absolutely.
When you offer zero behavioral feedback, you essentially force their brain to short circuit.
We can call this the psychology of the one-sided fight.
The one-sided fight.
Yes. When you lean in to push someone and they simply step aside, your own momentum causes you to trip over your own feet.
Oh, wow.
The attacker's momentum works entirely against them. Without your reaction to justify their elevated emotional state, their behavior suddenly exists in a vacuum.
It becomes glaringly disproportionate to the situation.
Exactly.
It's like a furious game of tennis.
Yeah.
They wind up, they hit a vicious, aggressive serve right at you.
Right.
And instead of diving to hit it back, instead of scrambling to return the aggression and keep the volley going, you just calmly reach out, catch the ball in your hand, put it in your pocket, and just look at them.
And how do they look in that moment?
Standing on that empty tennis court, they don't just look foolish to you. They look completely unhinged to everyone else watching the game.
Exactly.
They are standing there, panting, sweating, swinging a racket at nothing. The game is over solely because you refuse to swing back.
And that feeling of looking foolish is the absolute catalyst for their internal unraveling.
So it's actually painful for them.
Very. The attacker begins to feel choked by their own actions. Because they are receiving no external validation or counterattack to focus on, they are forced to confront their own internal reality.
Have to look at themselves.
Yes, the awareness of how unprofessionally or immaturely they are behaving comes from within them. It doesn't come from you lecturing them.
Right. If I tell Bob he's acting aggressively, he will immediately defend himself. I become the problem.
Exactly. You give him an out.
But if I just watch Bob act aggressively and maintain absolute silence, Bob has to listen to the echo of his own voice in a quiet room and realize, wow, I am losing control.
Yes. When you lecture someone, you give them an external enemy to focus on. But when you remain silent and composed, you hold up a mirror.
This raises an important question then about group dynamics.
It entirely upends our conventional understanding of how authority is established in a group.
How so?
We are evolutionarily wired to think the loudest ape in the room, the one pounding their chest and dominating the conversation, is the alpha.
The one taking up the most space.
Right. But true status, a natural, enduring hierarchy of respect, is actually measured by who has the lowest heart rate in the room.
It's totally counterintuitive, but it makes perfect sense. When everyone else is losing their minds and you retain your composure, a natural hierarchy just forms instantly.
People instinctually look to the person who is not governed by their limbic system.
Your attitude itself becomes your persuasion. You don't need to argue that you are the bigger person. You simply embody it, and the room physically feels the shift in gravity.
And the attacker feels a deep sense of awkwardness, as if their petty motives are completely transparent beneath your calm gaze.
Which leads us to the long-term evolution of this dynamic, because this isn't just about winning one meeting, right?
No, this plays out over months and years.
Getting no reaction when you're actively trying to provoke someone is a deeply uncomfortable psychological experience.
It is painful to be met with a mirror when you desperately wanted a punching bag.
And human beings, like all organisms, are subject to operant conditioning.
Right, so we are talking about basic behavioral reinforcement here.
If a specific behavior, like attacking you or making snide comments, yields an unpleasant, awkward, or completely unrewarding result, the attacker will eventually stop performing that behavior.
Exactly.
It's not that they suddenly had a moral epiphany and became a fundamentally better person.
No, they didn't go to therapy overnight.
Right. It's that their past experiences with you have reprogrammed their approach. They will instinctively avoid attacking you in the future because their brain associates attacking you with the painful feeling of looking foolish.
Precisely. They learn that engaging with you on a hostile level yields no dopamine, no validation, and no status increase.
So what do they do instead?
Well, often, after a brief period of testing your boundaries, what psychologists call an extinction burst, where they might actually try slightly harder to provoke you, just to see if the old rules still apply.
Just to test the waters one last time.
Exactly. But after that, they will simply give up. They will shift their targets to someone else.
Someone who will give them what they want.
Right. They will seek out someone who will play the game, someone who will provide that friction and drama their ego is seeking.
This brings up a really fascinating psychological quirk for the person listening. When you've been locked in a dynamic of conflict with someone for years and suddenly they ignore you and go pick fights with a new guy, it can actually feel strange.
It feels very disorienting.
You might feel a bizarre sense of irrelevance or even a misplaced guilt that someone else is taking the heat.
We can become strangely addicted to our own conflicts.
We really can. They give us a sense of purpose, a narrative where we are the aggrieved hero fighting the daily dragon. And when the dragon just walks past your desk to bother someone else, the story ends, and that can feel, well, weird.
It is entirely normal to feel a brief void when a chronic stressor is removed, because your nervous system had literally adapted to anticipate it.
It was always bracing for impact.
Exactly. But that shift means you have successfully leveled up. You have outgrown the conflict. You have made yourself fundamentally inhospitable to drama.
I love that. Inhospitable to drama.
The key is to recognize that orientation and not allow yourself to feel guilty for stepping out of the mud just because someone else chose to jump in.
Right.
You are modeling a boundary, and eventually others may learn to adopt it as well.
But there is another potential outcome here that is even more fascinating. It's not just that they leave you alone. In some cases, your worst rival might actually start imitating you.
Yes, this is a remarkable phenomenon.
The person who is just trying to tear you down begins to emulate your behavior. How does the psychology flip from resentment to imitation?
It happens when the attacker senses a true, undeniable gap in emotional intelligence.
Okay.
Initially, your calm makes them angry because it denies them what they want. Then it makes them awkward because it exposes their immaturity.
Right, and the mirror effect.
But eventually, if they possess any capacity for self-reflection at all, that awkwardness morphs into a begrudging admiration.
Admiration.
Yes. Because deep down, everyone wants to feel in control of themselves. When they look at your non-reactive posture, they see someone who possesses a superpower they acutely lack.
Self-mastery.
Exactly. They realize that their tactics of yelling, attacking, and pointing out mistakes are actually incredibly fragile and ineffective compared to your unshakable calm.
So, consciously or unconsciously, they begin to mimic your posture.
They do.
They want to reach that same level of maturity because they see the tangible social power it holds in the room.
When someone senses that their habitual methods of asserting dominance are obsolete, they will look to the person who holds the actual power and try to copy their operating system.
Wow.
If your rival starts trying to stand on your level, if they start pausing and attempting to remain calm themselves, the relationship has fundamentally transformed.
You haven't just protected yourself, you've inadvertently elevated the entire dynamic.
You turned an adversary into a civilized colleague, purely through the gravity of your own composure.
That is just mind-blowing. And this philosophy obviously doesn't just stay compartmentalized at the office with one specific rival.
Oh, not at all.
The cascading effects of this practice bleed into every corner of your life. By continuing this stance of non-retaliation, everyday conflicts naturally decrease across the board.
They absolutely do.
And the mechanism here is crucial to understand. It's not that you suddenly develop matrix-level reflexes and are actively dodging fights all day.
No, you aren't just exhausted from dodging.
It's that the very seeds of conflict fail to sprout around you because you simply aren't watering them with your reactions.
It is the cumulative nature of emotional regulation.
Tell me more about that.
Well, every single time you feel the primal urge to pounce, whether it's someone cutting you off in traffic, a passive-aggressive comment from a family member, or a stranger being rude in a grocery store.
Everyday stuff.
Right. Every time you choose to activate your prefrontal cortex,
Hmm.
pause,
Mm.
and observe the urge without acting on it, you are laying a brick in the foundation of a new reality.
You are systematically building a frictionless life.
A frictionless life, yes.
But we have to define what that actually means for the listener, because a peaceful daily life isn't some miraculous utopian state where nothing bad ever happens and everyone behaves perfectly.
Right. Annoying people will still exist.
Egregious mistakes will still be made, Bob will still reply all, traffic will still happen.
Life is still life.
The frictionless life is the mathematical sum of these tiny daily choices to remain calm. It is the realization that a peaceful life isn't about controlling the chaotic world around you.
It's about establishing absolute mastery over your internal environment.
Much of the exhaustion, the chronic stress, and the pure difficulty we feel in our daily lives, what we might call the friction of living, isn't actually caused by the external events themselves.
No, it's caused by our constant, frantic, limbic reactions to them.
We drain our own cognitive and emotional resources by constantly engaging in petty battles, by constantly trying to prove we are right, and by constantly policing the mistakes of others.
Exactly. When you adopt the posture of non-retaliation, you are building a deeply effective psychological shield.
You stop leaking energy.
Yes, you preserve your mental bandwidth for things that actually matter.
Like your actual work.
Your real relationships. Your own creativity.
Mm.
You ease the general difficulty of living because you simply stop picking up and carrying the heavy, useless baggage of other people's emotional dysfunction.
It is the ultimate paradox of human interaction, isn't it? By focusing purely on your own state of being, by completely relinquishing the frantic desire to control, correct, or attack others, you actually gain the most profound influence over your environment.
You become the gravitational center of peace in any room you enter, simply because you refuse to be moved by the chaos.
So what does this all mean? If we synthesize this journey for you, the listener, it means that the quiet, powerful life you want isn't waiting for you in some distant future.
It isn't located on some mountaintop retreat.
No, it is located exactly in the 2-second gap between your rival messing up today and how you choose to respond.
Your entire quality of life is hiding in that pause.
We started today by acknowledging that the urge to pounce on a rival's mistake is a primal, hardwired instinct.
We aren't bad for feeling it. We just need the metacognition to notice it.
Right. We explored why giving in to that dopamine hit is a mirage that guarantees long-term conflict.
We looked at the alternative, the incredible power of the pause.
An active display of mental strength that establishes absolute boundaries by refusing the dance of aggression.
We saw how that calm, non-reactive posture forces the attacker into a psychological vacuum, confronting their own behavior.
Which often leads them to unravel, step away, or even emulate your maturity.
And finally, we discussed how compounding these small choices leads to a mathematically more peaceful, frictionless existence.
Listening to this, the mechanics make perfect logical sense. But let's be real, doing this in the heat of the moment, when your heart is pounding, your amygdala is screaming at you, and someone is right in your face, is incredibly difficult.
It requires immense mental discipline.
But the long-term rewards, a quiet mind, genuine self-respect, and a natural, undeniable authority are entirely worth the effort of that single deep breath.
As we close, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, one that expands on everything we've discussed today.
Okay, let's hear it.
We've spent this time talking about how powerful it is to forgive a rival's mistakes, to pause, and to choose not to attack them. But consider this. What if you applied this exact same radical, non-reactive forgiveness to yourself?
Oh, wow. That is a whole different paradigm.
Think about it. When you make a mistake, when you drop the ball, do you violently attack yourself?
Most of us do.
Right. Do you point out your own flaws with that same vicious, punishing energy, completing that destructive electrical circuit internally?
Just shocking ourselves constantly.
Exactly. What would happen to your own internal power dynamic, to your own mental health, if you just paused, observed your own error without retaliation, without self-flagellation, and simply moved forward with calm resolve?
That is profound.
The hardest person to not retaliate against is almost always the person in the mirror.
Pay attention to your impulses this week. Watch for that urge to pounce, whether it's on a coworker, a stranger, or yourself. Notice it, take that breath, step into the role of the observer, and see what happens when you simply refuse to strike. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We will see you next time.